Welcome to the Awaken Beauty podcast. I am Cassandra, your organic beauty, positive mind management, and biofeedback practitioner. And I have to say that we all live in a world that is absolutely full of medicine. And the greatest healing comes from this medicine when you can speak with it and you can integrate it with the living and life-giving world once again, and leading us back to that quiet place of divine purpose. Today, we're gathering for a deep and enlightening discussion with Australian Bushflower Essences founder, Ian White. And this episode is an invitation to learn how our mind, body, and our spirit can communicate with plant essences at the vibrational and cellular level. We are spiritual beings in a physical body. And when we look at nurturing ourselves through everyday stressors or through a global pandemic, and which is happening at the time of recording this episode, flower essences are an incredible friend and a source to help us unblock the unconscious and subconscious emotional entanglements we all uniquely carry. Now enjoy the sweetness of Ian's ethos as we discuss the fascinating history of flower essences and how Australian bushflower essences come into play today and how you can use them and use these beautiful native energetics to help self-heal and bridge to your true, authentic, evolving self today. Now I want to share a little bit about Ian before we start. Now, Ian is a naturopath and a fifth-generation herbalist, and he has researched and developed this all-encompassing emotional healing system using Australian flowering plants, which are the world's oldest and most prophetic, pristine wild healing plants. Now, Australian bushflower essences are vibrational flower therapy that works on an emotional level, balancing and harmonizing your overall well-being. An easy system to use for yourself, loved ones, and within the environment. So I want to welcome Ian to the Awaken Beauty podcast. Ian, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you in beautiful Australia?
Yeah, it's a lovely morning. It's sunny here. So great to be here with you, Cassandra.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Now, we have a lot going on in the world today as we speak. We have the coronavirus going on, but, what you offer is such a timeless and authentic experience if nobody's ever, used flower essences before. And so, I really love your story. And so maybe we could just start off with, what brought you, and really maybe it chose you because you have such a lineage here to, the extractions of flower essences and how you've created a life around this.
Well, I had the good fortune when I was growing up to live next door to my grandmother. And as you mentioned, this long lineage, I'm a fifth generation Australian herbalist. My great-great-grandmother came to Australia in the 1850s. Australia had a gold rush like California's at that time. She came across from Europe to work as a herbalist. And my grandmother and great-grandmother, both herbalists, were some of the first white people who the medicinal properties of Australian plants. And, so could either go down a dirt road to my grandmother's place, both our properties backed onto National Park, or, you could climb down a cliff to get to her. And I much enjoyed spending the day with her, going out bushwalks, helping her make up all the herbal tinctures and extracts, and going to school. So I'd feign illness, so pretending I was very sick. My parents would drop me off my grandmother's to be looked after. And when I thought they'd gone off to work, I'd make these spontaneous recoveries. And I think my grandmother enjoyed my company because my mum would come home and say, "Oh, how was Ian?" She said, "Oh, gradually he got better during the day." And I think from her, I got the appreciation that in the bush, there are all these plants of very strong qualities. Now, unfortunately, when I was about 9, she went traveling to Europe. Her body was riddled with cancer when I was born. She was a very heavy smoker, but she kept it at bay with all her various herbs. And traveling in Europe, she got separated from the luggage, which had the herbs, and the stress of traveling. She got very ill, went into a coma, was flown back to Australia, but never came out. Now, none of her knowledge was written down. my father was a pharmacist, but also a herbalist, but he was in the more traditional European, North American herbs like your golden seal and chamomile, etc. So for that knowledge, again, the second time after the Aborigines died off with smallpox and influenza, was lost. But legacy for me was that in the bush there are all these plants. And I went off, I was doing a science degree at university, went traveling in India, got very sick, and I just rebuilt my health with things like Tai Chi, yoga, herbal medicine. At the end of my degree, I realized what I was really interested in was natural therapy. So I did a full-time naturopathic course. And that's where I got exposed to the concept of flower essences. And at the time, this is over 40 years ago now, the only flower system was an English one, which is called the bark flowers. And I thought, well, they're great. Anyone can use flower essence. I really like that. But why isn't someone working with Australian plants, knowing the power from when I was a child, my grandmother? And, no one was. And I was graduate practicing. I was using the bark flowers. And sometimes, I had the right remedy, but people couldn't tell if anything was happening. And then a friend of mine I'd shared a house with as a student came to see me, told me he'd been diagnosed with bowel cancer. And would I hold a healing circle for all our mutual friends the next day? There was going to be some meditation, directing energy. When they operated, they found out that the cancer was everywhere and there was nothing that they could do. And they gave him a few months to live. So I continued this healing circle. And we held it every week. I opened up to anyone who needed healing, not just my friend. And shortly after he died, about 6 months later, in the meditations, I started getting pictures of plants, told where to go and make them up and what their healing qualities were. And for me, meditation is more gut feeling, so they're not very visual. So this was quite exciting. And if I didn't know the plant, there'd be a little caption underneath with the botanic name so I could research it. Wow. And what I found that there was synchronicity. If I made the remedy up, say, early in the day, patients I was treating later that day in the evening all needed that remedy. And I also gave me the opportunity to see how they worked. And what I found was rather than giving them 4 times a day for a month, I could give them morning and night for 2 weeks, and people could really notice the results. So for 2 years, I was in the bush every day, and I was giving all the remedies I was making to naturopaths, doctors, acupuncturist colleagues I knew, so they could use it in their clinic, see if they could replicate the results I was getting with my patients. And after 2 years, I was very satisfied and started publishing them. And today we have 69 remedies from all regions of Australia, from the desert areas, from the tropics to the alpine areas, etc.
Wow, that's profound. And you have this beautiful flower behind you, which is would you pronounce it Waratah?
Yep, perfect pronunciation.
Yes.
And that's actually the emblem of our company, because it's one of the most revered plants in Australia. In fact, when the white settlers came, the only flowers the Aborigines gave them was the Waratah. It was their most highest flower. And it's a remedy for black night of the soul, despair, and it's very powerful. It gives people that courage and empowers them. So, I saw this was back in the mid 80s when I was developing the essences, thinking, humanity is likely to go through a lot of ups and downs during, most people's lives. As you mentioned in your introduction with COVID-19 at the moment, just a typical example of that.
Right.
And the Waratah gives great strength and courage when people are in a lot of deep concern. And both your country and my country have a lot of problems with bushfires, the ones in California and the northwest of your country. We were ravaged by bushfires. We had 1 billion animals died in bushfires. We had something like, 15,000 houses burnt out just a few months ago. And, for that despair and anguish when, you've lost loved ones, everything's black and literally, then the Waratah was a great remedy for that.
Yeah. And I really, it has such strength, because through all times of our life, we have these dark nights of the soul, and everybody does. And it's also an opportunity to a great time of awakening. And, certainly what Australia has been through in the last year is so profound. I do have a couple clients that are native to Australia and just, weep for the losses there. On that note, are any of you where you cultivate, are any of those areas, does that affect you, and has that affected your sourcing?
Well, we've probably, I'm making remedies all through the year, but probably the most active time is August, which is coming to the end of our winter. We're the opposite to the northern hemisphere, and then really
Right.
it's the beginning of the spring flowers coming out, and up until December is probably the peak time. And there's one orchid that I work with called the red helmet orchid. Now, this grows on the other side of the country. It's about a 5-hour flight to get there and a 5-hour drive. And it's just this one mountain where it grows, and it's almost like a semi-rainforest region. And I saw on the news this particular mountain just all up in flames. And the red helmet orchid is very tiny. It's about the size of someone's little fingernail. And, like, I've got grave doubts. What's going to happen when I go over there in this coming September? Will it be there? Also a flower, and red helmet is a fantastic remedy. It's the only one that I know. It works on the relationship between a child and their father, but also works the other way, helps the relationship a father has with their children. Mm-hmm. So you might be an adult child and your father's in their 70s and you don't have a good relationship with them. You can still work with this remedy. So it's such a beautiful gift that I'm probably going to have to do a lot more research. And a flower that we use a lot called 5 corners, which is working on self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence. And ironically, it's not a very common flower, and a bit like self-esteem. And, since some of the fires, all the plants that I normally work with, I haven't been able to find one of them. So again, it will flower in September. So, every day I'm out walking different trails, different regions, and I know I will find it, but it's making it a little bit more challenging, as is the changing weather patterns.
Yep.
So the flowering times can be different. And I said, sometimes I might have to fly to the West Coast, which is said the 5-hour flight. There's connecting flights for 3 hours to make up the boab tree, which clears old family patterns, which gets passed down through the generations. Now, I did all that trip one year and was late coming into flower. So, I had to, do all those trips and flights back home and wait the next year to make it. So I think one of the problems people are feeling with, say, our bushfires is the environment's changing. We're getting hotter and hotter. Certainly in Australia, there's less rainfall, so everything's become very dry. It's a bad combination for bushfires. So there's that sense of things are changing, and I guess we have to wait and see what will eventuate.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And, I think whether it's COVID-19 or it's the bushfires or it's, whatever this is, this transition right now is that we're really learning as human beings that we are an organism, right? We think we're so superior to the world that we live in, that we have so much control. And I think what we're learning is that we really aren't, and we have control, but we don't have as much control as we think, meaning nature, we live with nature. We honor nature and live with nature, and we have to reflect with what it gives us and what we give it. And so, with sustainability, this is, I grieve that for you, and that you have to be so mark on with your timing and how you search and are able to bring these into, your healing modalities and being able to offer that to the world. I mean, that's the heart of the beat of your practice. And so maybe we can jump into, I think a lot of people understand and have heard what Bach flower remedies are. And I was sharing with you, I have a biofeedback program in which, I can bring in and imprint the energetics, in which I have with all of your bush flower essences. And that's why I was so compelled to reach out to you, because when I run them for myself or I run them for other clients, they are just beat on. And then there are some in there that show up that bring an awareness to us. And so I really feel that one, biofeedback with your essences have been an extreme gift to be able to bring people aware of their emotional and subconscious, essence of their energetic health. But let's talk about energetics at the level of how these are distilled and then offered as a product, because everything is energy and energy is everything. And, we're talking about I name it an infoceutical. It's informing your body energetically to kind of come back to this equilibrium and to turn up or turn down these different facets of where the body and the emotional body, mind, body, and spirit are. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, how they are made, and then how that works with the energetics of the body, because to the point of we are an organism in the world and with the planet, we are also all vibrational beings that cohabitate together, and how this impacts us. So why don't you go ahead and explain a little bit about how you distill them and then how it works with the body?
Sure. And look, I think as a modality, flower essences are linked as a vibrational modality, similar to gem elixirs, homeopathics, or they've all got their variations. So the history of flower essences, we even jump back a little bit further. The earliest records go back 3,000 years ago to the Egyptians, where they used to collect the dew of plants to treat emotional imbalances. And the earliest European history is a very famous woman called Hildegard von Bingen. She lived in the 12th century. She was an abbess. She ran a monastery in Germany, and she would have the nuns lay muslin sheets out overnight over the flowers. In the morning, they would collect the sheets, wring out the dew, and use that to treat emotional imbalances. If someone was very ill, they'd wrap the sheets around them in hydrotherapy. And we had Paracelsus, very famous name in medicine, also collecting the dew of plants. But indigenous cultures around the world, in India, Japan, Australia, they always used to work with the flowers, and many of them collecting the dew of the plants. And for the Aborigines, they would pick flowers, float them in water, and drink the water, knowing they were getting not only nutritional qualities, but also that vibrational healing quality. And it seemed a lot of that knowledge got lost in many cultures. And there was an English doctor, Edward Bach, in the 1930s, who was a homeopath, medical doctor. Then he thought nature would have a much simpler answer to illness. So he developed a range of 36 remedies. He used to talk to the gypsies and get their information, and Rudolf Steiner influenced him, talking about some of these remedies. So he put together 36 remedies, which was working predominantly at the emotional level. Now, the philosophy of flower essences ties in with Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese, going back thousands of years, where they noticed that our emotional imbalances our physical imbalances stem from emotional imbalances. So, for example, this current virus that's happening around the world is affecting the lungs with all the cytokines, and basically there's a lot of pneumonia. So the grief and sadness are the emotions which affect the lungs. So, for example, if someone's getting a lot of lung problems, it's an indication, hey, you're probably carrying a lot of grief. If you're really fearful and anxious, it's going to affect the kidneys. If you're really angry and cranky, it's the gallbladder and the liver. So, 90% of our physical symptoms stem from those emotional imbalances. So when you're working with flower essences, you're dealing with acute problems, but you're also working at a preventative level. So if you're treating someone who's very jealous, you can ease that emotional angst, but it's also going to stop them getting problems with their liver and gallbladder, for example. And Bach, in the 1930s, society was very different to what it is today. And what I've noticed in my work doing the Australian ones, that as there's a need in the society, new essences come down which address those issues and problems. And they're things we can talk about as the day goes on. Now, Bach originally collected the dew of plants, but he was an impatient character and that was too slow. So he simulated what nature was doing by collecting the flowers, placing them in water, leaving them under the action of the sun to release the vibration of that quality of the flower into the water. And that's diluted a number of times. So you end up with a liquid remedy, which people take the bush essence, it's 7 drops in the morning, 7 drops at night. For bark, it's 4 times a day. And if you're dealing with emotional states, you would take it less than if you're dealing with physical. Physical symptoms just mean that emotional state's been there for a longer time and started to come from our subtle emotional bodies into the physical body.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's the really key thing here. And in, you know, going back to how our thinking brain wants to take control of everything. But we, you know, as clinical hypnotherapists, you know, it's all of these undercurrents that really are truly affecting our health. And in no other time like COVID-19 is, I often talk about, Dr. Siegel's hand model, which is, flipping your lid. And so it's kind of like the limbic brain is down here at the core of the stem. And then we have the amygdala and then the prefrontal cortex. And when we're in shock or we're experiencing emotional trauma, we flip our lid. And so we're running out of this, very subconscious emotional brain that is triggered from past trauma, that's all stored in the body. And so if we can't become informed about what those are and be able to work with that at, somewhat of a cognitive level and being able to manage that, the flower essences are just such a beautiful way to have that knowing or that trigger, but then also going to something like, the essence of what's behind you with the Warata or some of these others to be able to help support those very, very real, raw feelings that we all feel. And those are emotions that we can't push away or push down. But these energetics can just help, how would you explain that? Is it integrating it? Is it supporting the body? When the infoceutical is entering into the field, how would you say that it's, addressing those different areas?
Look, I use the analogy that when you take a remedy, put it under your tongue, it goes into your bloodstream, then goes into the digestive system, to your nervous system. In the nervous system, and then goes into the meridians where the acupuncturists would stick their needles in, for example. There are holes in the meridians, portals. So silica, the connective tissue in our body, amplifies out that vibration of the flower. And we use the flower because it's the most evolved part of the plant. So we get the whole vibration of the plant using the flower. Right. Sends that out to all our subtle bodies, and then it works its way back onto the physical. Now, I just, two of the flowers that I've mentioned also work, as you said, not just even on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level. 90% of our beliefs are formed by the age of 3. So you might be 53, 83, and you're still being affected by beliefs you formed at a very young age before you had a lot of life experience. So, the essences will help clear those negative beliefs, if you like, on the subconscious level. Particularly one flower we've mentioned called the 5 corners, working on self-esteem. A lot of people have sabotage. They might come to you because they've got a particular problem. They've been to lots of people doing, say it's losing weight. Their diet's good. They're doing different exercise. They're doing everything right and it's not working. Usually find there's a sabotage to them achieving their goal. Or it might be a pain in the shoulder and they've been to the physio and orthopedic surgeons and the chiropractor and still not getting results. So that's a sabotage. And the bottom line between a lot of the sabotage is I don't deserve to have the goal. I'm not good enough to have the goal I want. The boab tree works at clearing those negative family patterns, which we pick up from our family. Now, you might have someone who's an alcoholic. We know that their offspring, if they have them, are going to be like 400% higher to have, more likely to have an addictive personality. So we can clear our own subconscious beliefs. We can hear the negative family patterns coming down. Sometimes you'll get kidney disease going through a family, but what it is there's a lot of learnt fear that the children pick up from their parents who picked it up from there. So it's running through the family, and right. Fear will affect the kidney.
Yeah. And I think that's really relevant. And I want, let's just hold there for a moment, because if we look at functional medicine, for instance, and 2 years ago, I was like, everything has to do with epigenetics, where, we know that, the subconscious makes up 90% and we're conscious 10%. And we know that 80% is our environment, our ecosystem that affects our health and informs our genetics on how they're going to act or turn on or turn off. And 10 to 20% is our actual genetics. The main hold of, even epigenetics, it's like, even if you do a test and you have like, okay, I have all these SNPs. Well, it's really, I've awakened to how relevant and somewhat irrelevant that is, because when you really go to what you're speaking of, is that even these genetics, these genetic markers, are a consequence of being turned on and turned off, of the lineage, of the patterns, of the emotional states, of these replicated loopholes in the familia of, alcoholism or whatever that be, that is making up the health and the energetic health of the family. And so I think that's just something I really wanted to highlight on what you're speaking of, because even in a world where we have all these advanced tests for epigenetics, it still doesn't beg the question, but what is the underlying cause?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of, the work that so many people doing in holistic thing is like trying to put all the pieces together and get to those causes rather than just merely symptomatic approach.
Mm-hmm. And then, I want to talk a little bit about what you offer within your collection. And I want to just kind of talk about, with that in mind, the virus. Viruses have been around for years. It's nothing new. And viruses, basically, they share information with our DNA. And so, I really liked how you attached it to the grief and the lungs. And I think for so many, whether it's political or spiritual, for, I would say, probably 5 to 10 years, people have feeling such a disconnect to the hierarchies in the world, and how we just have had a hard time finding our grounding. And so I really look at this virus as truly an opportunity for a reset, especially economically, politically, and then internally, for each and every one of us. And so I'd love your input on the virus and kind of what's going on in Australia, and kind of what even your metaphysical thoughts and beliefs are about the virus and what it's informing our DNA, and how we have an opportunity to really recreate ourselves at this time.
Yeah. And I might even go back something you said earlier, Cassandra, about, that superiority that people feel with nature. And I think nature's giving us a big slap across the face of, well, this is the reality. Because what I noticed, even going back to, say, bushfires in Australia, people all around the world watching the news, it triggered this eco-anxiety, it's being called, where, wow, nature can just turn around and destroy us and flatten us. And I think that's what's also happening now. And that was people in other countries who were not even touched by the fires, but though it just brought up the fear in people that, wow, nature is so strong, like what happens when it turns on us? And I think that eco-anxiety is very much based here around what's happening with this health crisis as well. There's a lot of fear and anxiety coming up. And we're in lockdown, you can't go out of your house. And yet this is a time, I feel, where it's really important. It's 2 simple things. Get yourself grounded, connected to nature, take your shoes off, walk on the earth, if it's, get grounded with nature. At the same time, being open up to our spiritual guidance and protection, sort of ground, but also open up at the same time. And what you have a fear of, you focus on, and it's very hard at the moment not to get this focus on this particular virus, because here in Australia, I'm sure it's similar in most countries, you turn on the news and it's saying how many people have contracted, how many people have died. So a lot of people are very anxious and fearful, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. And where's this all going to end? It's the unknown that people and how quickly that's happening. So there's this lot of fear. And, one of the remedies we have is the dog rose, dealing with fear, but also, say, a combination called emergency, which has remedies for terror and fear in there. And I think it's also a wake-up call of what are we doing in the environment? And look, there's a lot of controversy. Where did this, virus originate? Some people are talking about, it's people eating, bats in,
China.
a meat market in Wuhan. There's a
Yeah.
lot of other evidence to say that, there's an implication that it's a man-made one. Was it deliberately? If that's the case, was it deliberately let out, or was it accidentally? We won't probably worry too much today about going into those topics. But the other factor was, our government spending a lot of money on biological warfare? Is this what we really want our governments to be doing? And the second one is with 5G. It's interesting that the areas where they had the biggest outbreaks, Wuhan, Hangzhou in China, Zhengzhou, South Korea, North Korea, and Iran, are the places where there's more 5G towers, base towers, than anywhere else on the planet. And we know from studies that 5G will not only weaken a person's immune system, which is really crucial at the moment in dealing with this virus, but also increases the virulence and the potency of viruses, bacteria, and mold. Mold, for example, will send out 6 times the amount of spores when it's as a result of contact with 5G. So we've got this double whammy of weakening our immune system, which we need to have strong at the moment, and also increasing the virulence. And I think it's, I think people are really concerned with directions where governments are going on the impact. There was a professor of biomedicine at Washington State University, and he had this lovely quote saying, we'll look back in history, the fact that we unleashed all these 5G towers without doing any studies to see the impact on health. And this will be regarded as the most stupidest decision in the history of humankind.
Yeah.
And, let's hold back a bit. Let's check, is it having any harm, rather than just this economic desire to unleash something, probably, rushing into it too quickly. And I think, to me, this is part of the thing of connect people back to nature, but also let's stand up and voice our concerns, even though we think, oh, I'm an individual, what can that have? But enough of us say, look, hold on, then, governments will need to take some action.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up. And, we talk about all the different verticals and spokes of the wheel that are affecting this virus. And if you really look at the highest view in how this is really going to reset our world, I mean, never have we ever, and obviously we haven't experienced it, have we experienced something that has gone so global and so fast? And we do have to ask the question, why? Why is that? And I think that there is partly play at a hierarchy level, on a governmental level, on a political level. I think there's also very, very much an impact on the 5G. And people have to understand that if everything is energy, when we're all connected then on this energetic force of 5G, how much faster, just like, when you're talking to someone, when you're talking on the phone, it's energy that's being emitted to the other person that you're hearing at a vibrational level. Same is true with 5G, and we're expanding these energetic outputs everywhere and very, very powerfully. And so we really have to look at all of this. I know for myself, I'm very much attached to my phone, my clients, and texting and trying to be in touch with everybody, but I'm making it a practice. And if I'm going to be out of work for 2, maybe 3 months, I am making a ritual to go outside and to do exactly what you said. I'm telling all my clients to ground themselves and go out and do it. Well, now I'm doing it, and I have the opportunity to do that. And so it's a calling back forth. It's calling back to us to come back to our roots, to come back to standing on our truth. And I do believe that this will be especially if, they keep people out of work and they take away your livelihood, people are starting to awaken to what it feels like to be under a regime and what it feels like to have your freedom taken away and what it feels like to start to get your voice back that you probably never had because you were a Tommy-ton and just kind of ran around doing what people told you to do and what to think. That what a gift it is to actually have social media, to have podcasts where you and I can connect from Australia and the US and be able to share this information. And everybody's probably heard about it, 5G, a million times, but repetition will allow us to get a voice and say, damn it, I'm done with this. And then we can speak up, and, you know, whether it's martial law or what have you, I can guarantee there will be a fourth and a fifth, you know, push out from the government for funding, you know, et cetera, to keep the economy going. But, you know, this is the fallout of all the systems that were, and that we have the opportunity now to really declare our truth. Everybody's become their own self-agent. You know, we all have a job now. It's become your own self-agent because corporations are being torn down, everything. And so it really, truly is a birth. And this virus is sharing information, and it is awful how it is taking so many lives. And the fear is real, and we have to sit with that. But we also then have to identify what you're talking about is what are those patterns that are coming up? What is the real fear of what's happening right now? Well, the truth is, I'm sitting in a salon that's beautiful. I feel safe. I'm speaking to a lovely, life-giving person like you, and I'm safe. I'm good. I don't have to be fearful right now because everybody's in the same boat. And if we step outside our submarine and start pushing all the water into our boat, we'll sink. And so these are soulful conversations, being our own CEO, because you're now your own self-agent, and we all have to be, you know, responsible for ourselves and how we bring in information, the right information, and then decipher what's the truth and stand up to how we've been, you know, ruled for so long. So thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit. Yeah, you go ahead.
Hopefully at the end of all this, a change in a lot of the economic and social inequalities we have on the planet as well. And I think, you know, some of those things you mentioned, people finding their own power and you know, really reevaluate everything how we operate in our societies. It'd be interesting to see what the end result is. I'm very optimistic. I know you are as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very optimistic. Self-sufficiency has created a whole new meaning. So
can I add something about the 5G? It ties in this concept of what the fluorescence is, because I said, you know, one of the differences between the bush and the bark remedies is that bark lived 80 years ago. Society is very different today, such as, you know, dealing with 5G, the communications, etc. It wasn't even computers or cell phones when bark was alive. And one of our remedies is called mulla mulla, and it's in a number of combinations, one called electro. And we donated a lot of electro combinations, thousands, to an organization called Green Cross, which is an offshoot of Red Cross. Gorbachev, the former Russian president, was in charge of it. And they look at environmental factors. And when the nuclear power plant Chernobyl blew up in '86, most of the radiation was taken downwind to Belarus. So Green Cross every year would go and monitor the radiation levels in the children. The ones with the highest levels would be taken to the Alps in the summertime to be treated with various techniques. This is by endocrinologists, neurologists, cardiologists doing all the testing to see if they could reduce the radiation. And the electro combination reduced it by 43% in the next best treatment they've ever come across was 20%. Wow. And the mulla mulla, and you know, it's for all radiation. It's for solar radiation, getting sunburned, being out. You know, if you're going to get an X-ray, you can take it. Reduces the impact of the X-rays on your body. We have a travel essence which contains this remedy for when you go flying. You don't absorb as much gamma radiation. When you're high above the ground, you absorb more. But it's also very protective against electromagnetic frequencies. So, you know,
how have you tested that?
Where we do a lot of work with kinesiology, measuring people, again, all the studies done by Green Cross, you know, the thousands of children. So take the electrode immediately before and after each treatment, they're not burnt as badly and they recover a lot quicker. So the monomer seems to work with all different radiation. So, you know, we can I'm a kinesiologist as well. So you can get someone to put their phone up their head, muscle test them, it weakens them. You can hold some electro and it doesn't have that impact on them. So, my wife's a musician, but she's developed pendants because it's not easy you need to have the remedy next to your body within about 2 inches of your body. So, we have pendants with the electro, so you can wear it next to your body to protect you from the radiations from your computer, from digital phones, from your cell phones, etc. And now with 5G coming, if we can protect nuclear radiation, is also going to be very effective for our immune system against 5G. So it's like, as there's a need in society, nature will provide remedies to help deal with all these changes. It's again that one where nature is really very much supreme.
Yeah, little did we know that nature would be able to to deal with radioactive, output. And I did a podcast with Philip. Have you heard of the 90-10 technology?
No.
At all? So Philip, there's a gentleman from Austria that has developed the 90-10, and I'd love to learn more about your pendants. And I've looked at them online, and they're beautiful. So I just want people to know, so this is the 90-10, and then inside there's 5 different spheres or little small balls, and they imprint them with different energetics. And with their cube, they can take, such as like your flower essences, and then they can imprint the energy, and then you can wear them. And so, even with like the different technologies for people to know, we now have things that can take like the essences that he's talking about and infuse them in different things that you're wearing to help protect you, against 5G and some of those things. And so I think that's really profound. And I think that's a really great thing to bring up, is that, just the drops are great, but we really need to protect ourselves all the time. Because 5G is real, it's big, and Dr. Mercola has pretty much said, I'm devoting the rest of my career to electromagnetic smog, because it is that big of a deal. So thank you for creating the electro. I did see that on your website, and I thought that was a very, very incredible, timely essence. Now you have the single essences. If we can kind of just divide out, so you have the single essences, and then you also have these light frequencies. And can you kind of maybe take us down the collection of what the opportunities are and how you created them, especially the light vibrational frequencies is really intriguing to me.
So the bush essences are made up of 69 flowers from all parts of Australia. And from those, we make up into combinations like the emergency essence, the electro. Then we have 3 ranges of spiritual remedies. The first ones were white light essences, and they were made not with flowers, but guided to go to different places on the planet and to which best embodied that particular quality. And they're really opening us up to spirit and connecting to nature. The light frequency were really helping us deal with a lot of the changes on a spiritual level which were happening. For example, I went to Greenland to make up the Arctic essence, and one of the things that it's working to help realign us with the change in the magnetic frequencies, which is leading to people get really stressed and harried and speeding everything up. There's one I made in Madagascar, and it's very relevant today because it's dealing with what we call mass consciousness. So every person who's ever lived on the planet, every thought and feeling each individual has had has gone into this collective called mass consciousness. And so when a child's born, they're not only getting the influence of the family, but also mass consciousness, and especially in relation to health. Like we look at that biblical quote that life expectancy is 70 + 10. 2,000 years later, we're still only pushing up 10 years more up to about 80.
Right.
And we've got the potential for so much more, but it's like that mass consciousness limiting beliefs around our health and well-being. We don't often get to see a lot of very positive role models of people being older and very vibrant. It's like, oh, well, let's live to 100, but I'm in a wheelchair and I'm deaf and, I'm not fully present in my body. They're the models that we're getting and seeing. So what mass consciousness has a very heavy impact. Now, if we look at the history of humanity. We've had the 1980 Spanish flu, we've had Ebola, we've had the Black Death, the plague. So and sometimes it killed half the people in Europe, for example. So there's all those feelings and fear tied in, related to pandemics. So when we have something like this, people also tap into the mass consciousness. It accelerates that fear and anxiety. So, I think it's very good if we can extract ourselves, and that's from the negative limiting beliefs around health. And that's what the Madagascar essence, for example, is doing.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you have the single, the spiritual, and that's kind of the white light and the light frequencies, and then the divine presence essences. Can you say a little bit about those?
Yes. Well, probably my biggest spiritual juice I get each year is a meeting with a friend of mine, Sally Pullinger, who's a trans medium. She brings through a being called Old Chinese or Chung Fu. And, having one-on-one sessions, he's an ascended being. It's great counseling and guidance. And one time, it was about 5 years ago, I went there and Sally went into trance. But rather than, for example, Chung Fu coming through, there was this beautiful wailing sound, tremendous love vibration. And then some language which wasn't very earthly. And Chung Fu came in afterwards, said this was Isis, and she was blessing your work and wanted to make a remedy with you. Now, at that point, I thought Isis was just, Egyptian mythology, but this was actually a being. And she's really the divine embodiment of the divine mother, the divine feminine. And what she wanted to do was to come through and to offer her love and courage, take away our pain and suffering. And so next day, this energy was created. I thought it was going to be very quick. For about 15 minutes, she was just blessing her presence, the wailing. The energy was the love vibration was so strong. I had tears pouring down my eyes, thinking, what a beautiful gift this is going to be given. And when I was a bus conductor, saving up money when I finished high school, go traveling, there was one of the drivers was a German man. He'd been in the Second World War. He'd been in a Russian concentration camp for 10 years after the war. And he had great insights about life. And we were talking one day and he said, unfortunately, I've had the experience of seeing many men of many nationalities dying. He said, the one thing in common is at that moment of their great anguish and pain, they call out for someone. It's not their brother, it's not the father, it's always for their mother. And Isis is that embodiment of the divine feminine. So when you're in great pain and suffering, it's like that nurturing that you want your mother to help look after you. And this is the divine mother coming through. The following year, the essence that came through was what we call solar logos. And from the heart of the universe, there's these pulsations, golden light, which is the solar logos, going out to increase consciousness. And there's a real upsurge in consciousness. Now, the planet, Earth, Gaia, is part of that. She wants us to evolve with her. And normally when the solar logos rays reach the Earth, they're too strong. They get converted into white light of Christ consciousness, which then come down in a more gentle way. And the solar logos clears spiritual blockages that we have to allow more light in, allow our higher self to come through. And Melchizedek was present to anchor and ground it because it's such a strong energy. And it's almost like the yang version of Isis, which is that gentle, soft nurturing. This is just to blast and clear up those blockages that we have to allow more of our spiritual energies to come in. And we have a rainbow essence, which is a little bit more gentle. If people find it too strong with the solar logos, this is allowing that energy come in at different chakras and gradually build us up, prepare us to be able to work with the solar logos. And the fourth one is Gaia. And she as a being came through to help create that essence, which is really connecting us, grounding us into the earth and have that love and reverence. Because nature is so strong. She's always trying to balance our imbalances. There might be a cyclone, there might be fires, trying to correct our imbalances on the earth. And if we keep polluting with different things we're doing with nuclear 5G, she'll just wipe us off. We don't have the potential to destroy the earth. That's arrogance that we're that strong that we can do that. I mean, we'll be smitten. So it's like really having that love and reverence and working in connection with Gaia. So
Yeah.
they're the divine presence. And the three spiritual ones are used individually. We don't mix them together. Where the bush essences, we can combine a number of flowers together in the one bottle that the person is taking.
That's great. I just think that's so incredible, and how you've embodied that and offer that to all of us. And I think, love and self-love is such a really needed conversation right now, because, well, any time in our lives, because I think it's probably, one of the number one things that most people really struggle with at the deepest level. And that's a form of disconnection, and if we continue to talk about energetics, and this is what we're talking about, we see this expressed through what you're speaking of, expressed through Emoto's work, and being able to put love frequencies or hate frequencies into water and freeze those, and really see the disarray of, the imprint of energetics in what that looks like visibly. And also self-love, if we talk about the body, when we have maladaptive thoughts, or we don't feel loved, or we have hate or anger, or any of these emotional pieces that we're storing, whether we know it or we don't, everything is energetic in the body. And our enzymes are energy given to the body to break down and to produce and be a catalyst to all systems in the body. And so if we're not feeling loved, or we don't have that love, really truly at an energetic level, the enzymes even in our body start to shut down. And then our systems in our body don't run correctly. And, so this portal of love is so really, truly important, that we both are able to feel it, to own it for ourselves and give it to ourselves, but also make it reciprocal, because we're put on this planet to love others. I think I heard from somebody is like, women are put on this earth to learn how to love themselves, and men are put on this earth to learn how to love women, or something like that. I thought that was kind of funny, but just on these specific notes, I think that they're really powerful, and they're very important, because every single hypnotherapy client, if we really get down to it, you don't feel good enough, you don't feel loved, and you don't love yourself.
Yeah.
So
at my workshops, I ask people, have you ever had a time in your life where you haven't felt good about yourself, or your self-esteem has been low? And it's like, only the compulsive liars keep the hand down at that point. It's like that, part of being a human is to, you go through to build up your self-worth and self-esteem. And you mentioned Emoto, which is the great thing about his work. He made it so easy to see as you said, that impact of hate and the positive aspects of love. And in fact, when you think of, well, that's those emotions affecting water, and we're 70% water. So, when you're having those really rage and resentment building up in you, what's that doing to your whole being? It's such a beautiful way to see what the impact it's having on us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your work is incredible, Ian, and I just really want to thank you for your contribution. And I'm sending you love, and to, your whole company and all of those that are involved in what you do, and holding you up during this time. And as you cultivate through the seasons, that you have just an abundance to add to your collection and to offer to the world. And so, is there anything else that you would want to mention based on the bush flower essences? Now, for me, I always knew of Bach, and I think that's really interesting, is, kind of thinking about how do we evolve with the planet, and how do we evolve with such a product like Electro, where, okay, well, now we have 5G. So what can we create within nature to then help us protect ourselves from that? And so I think part of your story is really, and what I'm pulling and taking away, is that you're an evolving company that has these, essences of truth that come through, that poof, and it creates a new product for the right time and for the right people in the right place in where we're at in society today. So I think that's one, key takeaway that I'm taking away from, what is the differentiation between all these different flower essences, is that's one. And I also have a question with, the mastermind gal that I had first learned about bush flower. And it was kind of funny, I'll tell you the story, is she was pulling up my energetics through biofeedback, and it was the flannel flower that came up. And I think it is for women, and it has somewhat of a relational and like a sexual, maybe you can tell us what the flannel is, and then I'll tell my funny joke.
Okay. Well, it literally gets its name because the texture of the petals is very sensuous, like that material flannel. And it's got little green tips on the end of the petals. It's like fingers with the fingernails going out. So flannel flowers are a wonderful remedy for helping people feel comfortable with physical intimacy, being touched. Maybe you've had abuse and you're with a person you really want to be with, but you feel uncomfortable about being held and touched. And it's also helping on emotional intimacy to be open to express your feelings more. So it's quite a beautiful flower. And on our website, we do have videos, and there's a video of me being in just one of the most amazing patches of flannel flower I've ever seen. So, go and have a look at some of the if you want to see what the flowers look like, the waratah or flannel flower, go and have a look at them.
I do love your videos. They're a lot of fun. He has a YouTube channel, and it's really fun to be able to walk with him through the native land and to see the flowers and the explanation and just the beauty of them. They're just so beautiful and so exotic compared to, some of that we have here. So, well, she brings it up and she kind of kept just kind of going over it. And I'm really into flower essences. And I was like, well, what does it mean? And she kind of went over it. And so I went and dug up what it meant. And that was my first introduction to your bush flower essences. And I was like, it's okay. I haven't had a partner for a very long time. I'm open to it. It's my spirit saying that I'm opening up to, I'm open to that essence of bringing a partner into my life. So that's kind of what I took from it, and a couple other things. But I thought that was a really interesting Bach flower that came up for me. But the one piece is,
we all want to know what the results are.
Yeah, well, since we're on lockdown, I can't go anywhere and partake in meeting people other than on Zoom. But with the bush flower essences, what comes through to me is the power of them. I see Australia like on this space over here on the globe and in the world, and it has such a indigenous, like separated strength to it, that's separated and strong. And can you say a little bit about why the bush flower essences and the speak within the natural healing community is that these are some of the strongest essences that are offered today? I mean, is that because of its containment of where you are globally, or how would you speak into that?
If we go back to, over 50 million years ago, there's basically two major land masses. And Australia, South America, Africa was one, and Antarctica was one. And gradually all the continents started to separate, to move. Australia was the last one to separate from Antarctica about 30 million years ago. And being an island, it was quite contained. So you had the plants growing there, growing in isolation, which weren't impacted by other things coming in and moving in. So it's like when I show my workshops images of the flowers, people think, well, they're really quite ancient looking, a bit different to a lot of their countries. And Australia had the first erosion, which created the first soil. So that's why the geologists and botanists agreed the first flowering plants occurred in Australia. And we have the highest number of flowering plants. But sometimes I can teach in Europe, and a few kilometers away there was battles in the First, Second World War where tens of thousands of people died violently. We were lucky in Australia that the indigenous people wasn't a very big population, but they were very peace loving, as opposed to sort of more the Pacific Islanders, a bit more warrior like. So, and there wasn't as much major battles with the indigenous community. They used to travel and work together quite well. And there was no major battles between the white settlers and the indigenous population. So from an energetic point of view, it's very pristine, not only physically, but also psychically. And I think for all those reasons, the plants have a really depth and strength, why they can, work very quickly. I think that's the reputation they have worldwide at the moment.
Yeah, it truly is. Really remarkable. end of my podcast, I always ask my guests, on a personal level, Ian, whether it's related to COVID or not, whether it's related to flower essences or not, what is something that you personally have awakened to at a deeper level in your life as of recent?
Look, we look at the flowers coming through. There's one beautiful flower called pink flannel flower. So we talked of the flannel flower. The pink flannel flower is very tiny. It's got the most gorgeous pink color. Pink is the love vibration.
Mm-hmm.
When I made it up in 2002, it hadn't flowered for 40 years. It's only a very isolated area where it grows. Not many people had ever seen it. And a number of people contact me saying, hey, we've just seen some pink flannel flower. And it's an amazing remedy. It's working on that heart chakra. You mentioned Emoto, and he was showing that love is the highest frequency. What he also showed was gratitude was equally as high. They were the two strongest aspects. And what happens is that a lot of the children being born this millennium, they come here to heal people through their ability to give out love. That heart chakra is going to be such an amazing vehicle to heal others and the planet. But being exposed to the cruelty, the more nasty aspects of humanity, a lot of these children, their heart chakra is closed down. So the pink flannel flower really keeps the heart chakra open. And it's not only for children, but it's also to bring about a sense of gratitude. And I really love where you're talking about the impact of this virus. Of you're seeing all the positive aspects, and and I think for me too, really looking at what's happening, of not getting caught up in fear or, gee, this is terrible, but like, wow, what are the opportunities? What are the gifts coming through this? And it just reminds me of, that I think that insight that there's a reason why things happen. There's a spiritual guidance and direction that we are being protected and guided through for the betterment of humanity. And it was just that gratitude of feeling that, and just knowing how guided we are, and that there's always a greater overview, and to really trust that. And it eases the fear. And I think gratitude is just a beautiful thing. And I think, just having that gratitude, no matter what we're going, looking for the positive rather than focusing on things which we're not so happy with.
Yeah, I love that. Gratitude, absolutely. And I forget his name, but it's at the tip of my tongue, but Emoto, and we talk about the range of emotions, and vibrationally and energetically, shame and fear being at the lowest, and so we have a choice to kind of be there, or we have the opportunity to elevate ourselves through conversation and meditation, and using, such products like the bush flower essences to really help us. I always talk about, using products like bush flower essences or energetic or biofeedback to help us with the unresolved subconscious pieces of ourselves. And we can't do it all ourselves, and we need the help of others. And it is in the pursuit to help us open up our consciousness, to open up this aspect of being able to bring in more light and love, so that we can share that and give that to others. And, really, truly, I think that's the high calling. And, I want to applaud you for your products. I can't wait to actually get them in my hand versus just giving them out frequency-wise. I invite everybody to go to your YouTube channel, because you have a lot of really awesome, fun videos there. Do you know of, in the USA, do you do a lot of education here? Kind of what's the input and output into the US, and how people can connect with the bush flower essences?
Yes, well, I do live workshops, and unfortunately this time we've travel and groups coming together, but we have some of my workshops are on DVD. Also, we've got a large collection of webinars which are available for people, can, especially being at home, they've got opportunity for going through and going through their learning at home. My books are available as well in the US, and we have a distributor called Southern Herbs, based in North Virginia. So, there's ways you can come directly to our website. So hopefully there'll be a lot of opportunities people can do it. We have a correspondence course, a 60-hour course with a tutor if you want to go in and study again at a very deep level, all about the essences. And so there's hopefully a lot of opportunities if people like to follow up and learn more.
Yeah, now's the time. Just such a wealth of information. So thank you so much, Ian White, for being on the Awaken Beauty podcast. I'm so gracious that we can make this happen, especially in a time like this where we can open up everybody to love and really rise our vibration above fear and anxiety. So for all of you that are here with the Awaken Beauty podcast, please make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And from me to you, and thank you, Ian, stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back.
And thank you for all the great work you do, sharing information with so many people, all the people listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you.